an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Magicians, Season 1, Episode 13. Have you brought me little cakes? In this episode, well, they were so close, guys, and it was in their grasp. They could have just done it right, and it could have, they had started to win me over. Why would you do this? Why? Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. So, first of all, thank you to Ashley for commissioning this episode. But also, Ashley, you can go to hell. Oh, guys, I'm so angry. I'm so mad. This show was just... And I am, like, going into this basically like, I need you guys to reassure me that this shit gets better. That this, like, doesn't keep doing this. Because I am not here for any of this anymore. Like, this is the sort of thing that my tolerance is just, the bottom is dropped right out of it. And anyway, so some of you may not even remember what I'm, like, so angry about. Because I was talking to Jamie and she didn't even remember because she had watched all of them at once. But so, I'm not even going to go, like, beat by beat throughout this episode because, to be honest, this episode is super rushed. They tried to pack a good 3 episodes worth of plot points and twists and content into one episode. And it's really just kind of bananas that they left so much of what happens here for the very last one. Like, it's just really... I'm just going to talk about the things that, like, caught my attention that I feel like deserve the extra, time. So, obviously, the first thing I'm going to talk about is the fact that Julia gets raped. So, y'all, I already wasn't super happy with the fact that Julia is sexually assaulted in the first episode to sort of force her magic out of her. I don't love that trope. I don't love the idea that, like, the only way to scare someone into doing something is to do that kind of specific attack that's just... And then for Pete, who was the one who was, like, acting like he was about to harm her, specifically sexually, when she's like, "We're not going to rape me," and he's like, "What? No, I would never do that." All fucking, like, resentful and indignant that she would... You just did it, guy. You don't get to be surprised now. But then we have this, which, this show is obviously not afraid to shy away from sex and sex magic in general. There was a whole episode that just centered around that. But there's something about specifically what's going on with Julia that feels really pointed and gross. We have her being sexually assaulted in the first episode. We have her using sex to get information in the scene with Pete. And, there's this sort of, like, it's supposed to be that, it's because she's an addict. But then, she goes to rehab and then she winds up having sex with a guy from rehab. And it all just feels like there is something about her character that, like, I don't know how much of this is in the original source material, but it feels like he just wants her specifically out of everybody to be like punished in the end. You know, like she feels like she's being punished from the beginning, honestly. And to have that baggage of Quentin like being angry at her for her not having feelings for him, there is, and there's no way for me to back this up. This is purely like conjecture and my like sort of nice guy senses tingling. But there's something about this that feels to me like a dude writing a woman who, that guy is bitter, and he's like, well, see, she'll sleep with everybody else, but she doesn't give the one guy who really likes her a chance. And there's something, it just feels like it's directed and low-key malicious. And both times, both in the attempted sexual assault in the first episode and then the actual rape in this episode, it is allegedly making her stronger, which is the most disgusting trope of all. The first one, it forces magic out of her and proves that she can really do a thing. Did this guy approach her and try and get her to do something and talk to her about it? No. He decides to do this really creepy fucking gross thing. And then in this one, it's literally, she is stronger and able to grab onto this knife that burns everybody else because she was raped, because of the fucking cum. Y'all, this is real disgusting. Like, the rape makes you stronger trope is ugly enough when it's not fucking literal like this. You know, what was this writer thinking? If this is how this goes in the books, like, honestly, I am so over it. And I will tell you all right now, if this results in some sort of like magical demon god baby thing that she's pregnant with, I'm fucking out. Like, I'm just going to tell you right now, I have no fucking patience for that ever anymore. Every fucking show that has supernatural shit decides to have some sort of like rape pregnancy thing in it somewhere. And it's so annoying. Like, I just hate it. It's just, oh my God. That's like part of what caused me to like low-key check out of Dark Tower. Spoilers. But like, there's one fucking female character out of all of the many, and that's what happens to her. And it's just disgusting. I don't understand the fascination with male writers and having their female writers or female characters experience sexual assault and be impregnated by it and have to like go through this. Because it's never a male writer who's like, oh my God, she's experienced sexual assault. I'm not going to write the whole scene out on the page. I'm just going to have her deal with the reality of that and then go and get an abortion because she doesn't want to carry this baby. It's inevitably, she got raped and I'm going to talk about that whole scene, be really gross about it, and then I'm going to have her either be forced to give birth to this by some outside force, or the baby gestates really, really fast and she has no choice but to like go through with it. And often they will invoke some sort of creepy like maternal instincts kicking in and she's protecting this baby even though she doesn't really want it and she can't control the love that she... Shut up. No. Nope. I just don't... Jesse's saying the exact thing I was going to say. I'm reading Jesse's comment, guys. The writers had the opportunity to change the rape scene into anything else. Literally a world where anything magical can happen, and they still chose to use rape in that way. It's beyond disappointing. That's exactly what I was going to say. Even if this is in the source material, you don't have to fucking do this. You don't. You could have this be anything else. And the one thing that I could see people doing is being like, well, she, let herself get assaulted to save Katie because Katie's hiding under the table and the fucking god demon thing gets distracted enough with Julia that it looks like Katie is able to just run away. And like at the end of this, we don't know what happened to Katie or where she is or what's going on. But it's sincerely like the fact that it feels like an edgelord's great idea that we're going to have it be the cum of these gods that gives the power. I get it. It's sort of funny. It's like a gross out moment to have Alice chugging down a cup of cum. Honestly, guys, there's a lot of porn out there that has this sort of trope of like a girl either getting bukkakied or just straight up like a bunch of guys gangbanging her and then they all come into a container and she has to drink it. Or they all come in her mouth and she's not supposed to swallow until they're all done and then she's supposed to swallow everybody at once. This is like a straight up thing that's like a fetish. So that's another thing is like, I feel like if you don't know it's a fetish, you could find this just sort of funny. But if you know it is, then it's like just kind of a gross Tarantino-esque women's feet in every scene sort of thing. That's like, no, you just get off on this, I feel like. And you're just, you know, I don't feel like it's an accident that it winds up being a female character that winds up chugging this. Like, I was congratulating this show for having a threesome with two men and showing two men making out and like having it be somebody who's like, you know, obviously either bi or like pansexual. I appreciated that. And I tried to give them more of a benefit of the doubt, but they are not having this shit happen to the men. They just aren't having this go down this way. And I can't feel like that's anything but pointed and specific. And I have no respect for like the argument that, well, women do experience more sexual assault than men and they're just trying to, no. This is fiction. You know, we don't have to do this. And the way that it's handled as well with the like reveal of it being incredibly abrupt, I found to be really irresponsible. Like, I think Tessa was in the chat and she said something about in the comments when I posted in the Facebook group basically for patrons. And I was just like, you guys are going to have to fucking tell me why to keep doing this because this show has sort of lost me at this point. But she said she thought about sending me a trigger warning because of how the rape scene is just so like upsetting. And I'll say this, I found it like it's deeply upsetting because it's so shocking and comes out of nowhere. I appreciated that they don't center him in the scene, but it does feel like gross and voyeuristic anyway. There is a way to do this. I'm sure that it doesn't feel that way. I feel like they did as good a job as they probably knew how. But when you have this track record established already, it's really difficult to find your way back again for me. Like, really, if you have Julia getting assaulted in the first episode, the only way to win me back is not have this anywhere near her ever again, you know? And what sort of kills me on top of just the fact of the rape is that they're like positioning her to feel guilty for not only her own rape and feel like she's responsible for it, but also for the deaths of everybody else. Like, I see this being all that her character becomes about is carrying around this guilt that like she let this happen to everybody else. I see her rape being backseated to the deaths of all of these other people, honestly. And I am 100% not here for that either. She was deceived. She was a little bit bullied into doing this by, what's his name, Richard? Like, I'm not sure bullied is the right word, but she expressed a lot of doubts and feelings of like not being 100% on board anymore. And Richard just kind of like convinced her that she's like sort of, it just felt like he pushed her into something that she wasn't 100% comfortable with this summoning anyway. And the fact that she had misgivings and went ahead and did it despite that, it feels like that's a thing that they're going to like really be playing on, is that she knew something was wrong and she didn't stop them all from, you know, the summoning anyway. at this point getting mad about shit that hasn't happened yet because I just feel like it's inevitable. And I don't even feel sorry for that, because if they're willing to do something like this, I'm not going to give them the benefit of the doubt anymore as writers or writer about what they will or won't stoop to. And I'm not at all interested in watching somebody take blame for their own rape. I'm not going to sit here and like listen to the fandom low-key blame her, which I'm sure happened. Like, even Quentin at one point says something about like, well, when you're messing with summoning gods, things are going to happen. And he didn't say it in a way that blamed her. I will give Quentin some credit there. He says it more like, you couldn't know what was going to happen. But there is a feel to that of like, well, why did you go to his room if you didn't want to have sex with him? What did you think was going to happen? What did you expect? I mean, he has a right to think that you're on board with things if you do something like this. And I just don't, the one good thing that I liked about that scene was Marina getting involved. And I liked Julia really not knowing who else to call and getting in touch with Marina, and Marina reacting with actual horror and support. Marina doesn't go, well, sorry, I kicked you out because you were not willing to listen, and these are the consequences of... No, Marina is like, oh my fucking God, what happened? Are you okay? What can I do? Let me help, you know? And obviously she is the one that puts the spell on Julia to forget, which... This is something that... I don't know how many of you guys followed along with the other Spoil Me, where I'm doing some Diana Wynne Jones books. One of them was The Dark Lord of Dirkholm. And it was a really fucking off moment because they had, like, Diana Wynne Jones is a woman writer, and I was so disappointed that she chose to do this. And it's a very brief thing, but it's still there, where there's a moment of pandemonium and all these different people get sort of hurt or, you know, threatened in a really, like, upsetting way. And there's one female character, and it's subtext, but she definitely gets, like, gang raped. And a wizard comes and, like, basically, he doesn't take the memory away, but he sort of, like, makes it feel like it happened years and years ago, and helps her progress a lot faster with her mental recovery from the trauma of it. And it's, like, so completely unnecessary to the story. It really is. Like, it's one of those things that I just couldn't believe what I was reading when it happened. And that is, like, I feel like this is a better way of doing that, of having her just be like, no, straight up take this memory away. And her reaction of wanting to not remember, give me any sort of fantasy that I can believe instead. And I think I said last episode that I found it weird that everybody's off on some sort of mission, that we don't see the ritual for the summoning, that everybody gets put on this mission except for the person who supposedly was the reason they succeeded in the summoning. You know, like, Richard phrases everything as if Julia is the one that can pull this off and nobody else could. So it was strange that she was the one left behind while they all go doing whatever it is this god told them to do. But I kind of accepted it because I was like, well, maybe she's meant to do something more important and they're just, like, gathering things, or like lackeys at this point. But it didn't feel that way, and it was weird, and it put me on edge a little bit. And to find out exactly what it is here, that is, like, memory magic is something that I find sort of fascinating, and there is some stuff about this in other books that I'm covering. I can understand wanting this taken. I wonder about the long-term effects of it. This is something that I would have liked a little bit more elaboration on, because they, you know, meet Jane in Fillory. Like, she's on a different loop at this point. And they, like, she's the one who senses that something's going on with Julia's memory. And she says it's there for a reason. And because she says that and doesn't try to take it off, that leads me to think there wouldn't be long-term negative effects from this. I don't know, like, everybody who got brought to break bills to test and then was rejected, if they think of it as a dream, right? I don't know if that's like if Julia has a dream or not, but it feels like she was saying in that moment, Jane, that she could continue her life and never know, and that would be okay. So high five to Marina for like having this sort of skill and being willing to like work with this person that you have this like long-standing beef with, and being willing to set that aside because of welfare of like just a person. You have some compassion for a second, because they really did sort of set Marina up as being someone without empathy, you know, and to have this moment is a little shocking. I welcome it, but it really was more of a grasping at straws moment of like, I'm going to take what I can get in terms of people not being horrific, because it just seems like it's back to back terrible in this show sometimes. And then, okay, I'm going to move away from that and talk about the fact that I was right about Martin. Guys, I didn't want to be right about Martin. Somebody in the chat even brought up the fact that they were uncomfortable with the idea of like a sexual assault victim or sexual, like, oh, I'm sorry guys, my contact is fucking up. But that they really didn't like the idea of somebody who had been harmed in a way that many people are harmed being turned into a villain. And I agreed with that. But it felt to me like it was where the show was going. Like, it was just a little too obvious to have Plover be the bad guy after everything. This show, like, whatever I've learned about this writer is that he loves twists. And it just didn't seem like it would be on brand for the person that they all suspected to be the bad guy to wind up actually being the bad guy. I can respect not wanting to be predictable. I could have let it go that a sexual assault victim becomes a villain if that were the only time they showed super terrible judgment. But what they wind up doing is they have Martin and Julia teaming up at the end. Which, like, just again, because we have to have Julia basically so concerned about the fact that this god is loose in her world that she is willing to make a deal with the devil in order to try and get that god out of the way. And then eventually, I guess, she thinks she'll deal with the beast somehow. I don't know what she thinks the beast will agree to, but what it comes down to is that Martin is so obsessed with his own agenda that he winds up like draining Fillory of a lot of its magic and becoming like sort of a maniac and drained of his humanity due to absorbing too much magic. And he's, you know, out here like killing and torturing people. And then we have Julia, who has the opportunity to take him out and doesn't, and just leaves all of Quentin's friends that have been maimed and killed and bounces with the beast and puts her agenda ahead of being able to take this pure evil out. I honestly, like, you cannot have this be the twist after everything you've done. And I just sit here and like watch it and don't pass judgment. Making assault victims the bad guys in the end. And I'm not even saying Julia's like the bad guy, but she does something that feels really unforgivable in that moment. Like, one thing on top of another, guys. This is a pattern, you know? This reveals something, I feel, about this writer and the way that he sees the world and the way that he sees victims. And it just fucking upsets me. It's a sort of like insinuation that once you've been harmed, you're like irreparably damaged and just can't come back from it, kind of thing. And like, you can be traumatized. I mean, you will be traumatized forever if you are sexually assaulted. Like, that's just how that works. But behaving as if it somehow like breaks a part of you, I just hate this whole thing, you know? And I understand that it's supposed to be like, in this moment, Julia does not have good judgment because she gets all of the memories released on her all at once, like a dam breaking. And so emotionally, she is not ready for what it's like to get hit with all the facts at once. But again, there's so many things that you can be like, well, not really, because, and in the end, you're saying, well, not really, because so many times that it just feels like you're trying to not see what's right in front of your face. It feels like a denial of a completely obvious pattern. And, guys. And to top it off, like, you know, we're having that thing with Quentin getting out of his own head and admitting that he thinks that Alice is the one and not him. Which I think we're supposed to sort of like congratulate that he manages to, you know, kind of put his ego aside and his desires as a child to be the chosen one aside. I think we're supposed to be impressed by that. And like, I guess to a degree it's impressive, but also like it winds up being so pointless because it looks like Alice is just dead now. I don't know how much I buy that everybody is actually dead. I don't like, I'll be a little bit bummed if it turns out everybody's fine and we can just like, you know, use a time machine and go back and like completely fix everything and everybody is okay. But I also don't want it to be that she chugged a glass full of semen for nothing, because that's kind of what happens. She does this like low-key humiliating thing to get access to power that winds up not mattering in the slightest. And Quentin is the only one that looks like he has survived unscathed for some reason. I don't know what that's about. I don't know if the Beast has like something that he's going to do with Quentin. Like, if it's I wonder if this is sort of like a Voldemort Harry Potter thing where because the Beast believes that Quentin is the one, he becomes the one, even though his magic isn't the strongest. Like, because that's sort of what makes him think it has to be Alice, is she is just better at everything, you know? And I feel like that's a thing a lot of us have sort of said about Hermione in the Harry Potter books, that like Harry's somehow the chosen one, even though it's Hermione that's like got all of the abilities and fucking like critical thinking skills. But that's supposed to be part of the point, is that you don't have to be exceptional to wind up doing exceptional things. And maybe that's the thing here. But I am definitely like side-eyeing the whole battle at the end. You could barely call it a battle. Everything happens in about 2 seconds. Nobody gets any shots in almost at all. And the Beast winds up taking off Penny's hands. And it looks like either Margot and Elliot are knocked out or just straight killed. And Alice definitely seems dead. I really am, at this point, not going to allow myself to like get invested in what happens next, because I'm just so frustrated that they could build all season to this confrontation and it takes place in under 5 minutes. It's a weird choice to have so many other things be so drawn out. Literally, the hypothetical scene of the Beast's attack on their school when they're using that, like, you know, what if spell, that scene takes longer than this one does. The actual battle, the actual confrontation. Why? Weird. Why would you wait until the last episode for all of this fillery stuff to go down? We have the whole thing with like Elliot as well in this, meeting the god that's the ram, you know, all of that is happening from the beginning. This is packed, you know. We have the scene where young Jane has been caught by a snare and he remembers that two magicians come and help her. And he finally, like, both him and Julia finally figure out that they are the magicians in the story. It turns out they're in it and he had no idea, which is a pretty great idea. Like, I really like the concept that there could be characters that pop up in Narnia books that you didn't know were you at the time. What a cool, and it's just all ruined. Guys, I don't want to feel this way, but it's like, all of these awesome ideas that I really was excited by at the beginning of this episode. And then in the last, like, 5-10 minutes, they just shat all over everything. But yeah, it turns out that it's like the witch and the fool. And it turns out that Quentin is the fool, which is pretty great. Sorry about that, Quentin, but also not sorry at all. Haha. And when they, like, find the god in order to touch this, they first of all go to the god in order to, like, get his advice on where to go. They wind up going back and talking to him again about getting his essence. But he's the one who releases the memory spell off of Julia without really, like, thinking through what he's doing at all, which really does not speak super highly of this god. And I appreciate also the moment where Quentin, like, gives him a piece of his mind and is essentially like, you're fucking hiding in a hole like a fucking bitch. What are you doing? Like, your whole planet, your world is collapsing and you're acting like the battle's already lost, and it's pathetic and embarrassing, and you should be ashamed of yourself. I was here for that. Very, very much enjoyed that. There were a lot of moments like that. And then there's things with, like, Elliot, and I don't understand what they're doing here. Elliot, he's, like, being straight-washed. You know, I have said that I assumed that Elliot was bi or pansexual or whatever, that him and Margot almost definitely have had sex before. But there's a difference between being willing to engage in any gender when you're having an orgy and deciding to marry a virgin stranger. And they have it be sort of that he's like, oh, my life isn't working, is the way he says it to Margot. My life isn't working is a big statement that I don't feel we have evidence to support. He says something about how nothing has been able to make it work, not drugs or alcohol or sex or food. And okay, we do see there being, like, a nihilistic hedonist side to him that is, but it's never felt upsetting or depressing until what went down with Mike. All of this feels like it has to do with Mike exclusively. And that he just has this terrible trauma that he hasn't dealt with. And he hasn't had time to deal with. I'm not even blaming Elliot for not having dealt with it. But it's a weird choice to just be like, I'm going to take this character who I've really drawn as being outside of our norms for what is acceptable in society, for what is, frowned on. We're going to give him all of these traits that a lot of people would really side-eye, and we're going to make him a likable character. And we're going to make him somebody that's, like, actually good at magic and helpful. I don't know what winds up happening with Elliot. I really hope that they wind up, like, doing something because he's not dead. I'm hoping. But as of right now, deciding that he would be totally okay with, like, never returning to Earth and marrying and impregnating a stranger. He's so blasé about it, and it takes, because there's no time, it takes no thought on his part to agree to do this. He initially thinks that he can go back to Earth and continue to sleep with whomever he wants. That he can just, like, bounce in and out and keep on fucking and it'll be fine. Until Margot tells him, sorry, you're not only not allowed to sleep with anybody else, you are not allowed to go home again. And she tells him this, and it's like 15 seconds for this news to settle before he's like, all right, well, I guess I'll just do it anyway. What? I'm supposed to believe that he would just go ahead with this? Like, I'm not saying I don't believe in the end that Elliot would make the choice that's best for everyone, because honestly I do. But the fact that they decided to cram this all in on one episode means that he is not allowed to take time and think about this at all. It's disrespectful to his character, you know? It's just, I just don't really understand the pacing when it's just, you've got established source material already. There's not a good reason for the pacing to be as off as it is when you're writing from a storyline you've got mapped out already. And you're just, why would you wait? If you guys were writing this, if you took that book and decided to divide it up into 13 episodes, would you have all of this happen within the one last episode? It just is so, I was watching this like blown away at how fast things were moving along and having trouble at times keeping up with what is even going on. Guys, I'm sorry. I'm like all over the place on this, but this feels like an all over the place sort of situation. They run into like young Martin at one point. I'm not sure if at that moment Martin is aware of like what he's becoming. I have to think no, but at the same time, they run across a grave for him. And that's supposed to sort of cement that he isn't the one, right? We're thinking this grave means that the beast killed him and that this is all over. I don't really, do we get an explanation of why that grave is there or what's going on there? Regardless of the fact, Martin is the one that leads them to the Watcher woman, who turns out to be an older Jane Chatwin. And she is a little bit surprised when they tell her that the time loop that they're in is the one that she's died. I like getting to see her again. This moment, okay, so backing it up, what makes this episode fun to start off with is Quentin's narration of it. I could totally understand if some people didn't like this, but what I liked about it is the fact that so much of British children's literature is defined by a very conversational style of storytelling, where the writer acknowledges that there is a reader and addresses the reader at times, and they'll say something like, "I'm sure you would understand why Susan was so upset at this point." Just sort of trying to involve you in the story in a way that as a child you're totally into because you want to be part of this. And that the author addressing you and acknowledging that you exist makes it feel like they were writing this for you, you know? So I really liked the fact that they decided to go with this style to cap the season off, because it's sort of embracing what everything has been leading towards the whole time, which is that this is all part of a story that meant everything to Quentin, that even Margot was into. Alice wound up reading them. I think the only ones at this point that haven't read it, because Julia did too, are Penny and Elliot. So I really like that they decided to sort of embrace that trope. I love that Elliot is narrating like as best he can, but it still has his sort of like nervous, stuttering indecisiveness to the storytelling. I thought that was fun. And him discovering as he goes along that he is part of the story, or thinking about how this is all going to come across when somebody finds this later and reads it. I thought that this was a really smart way of handling all of it, and discovering that things that he thought were one thing in the story turn out to be something very different. So the Watcher woman he thought was this huge villain, and it turns out that she's Jane, whom he knows, who is working for the good side, and everything that he expected of her turns out to be the opposite, as he puts it. So I really, really liked that piece of the method of telling the story. I feel like if this had been 2 episodes instead of the 1, that would be ideal, right? But what, like, this conversation that he has here, I love when he tells her that when she dies, she says, please make sure that there's an adequate temple erected in my honor. Granite statue, good likeness, mind the chin. Honestly, these little moments of humor are what I'm here for. These kinds of things, where it's just sort of like a bit of a send-up of what Narnia was like. Because that is 100% a thing. That, like, the kings and queens of Narnia are all from Earth for some reason. That's acknowledged as being super weird. Quentin says, I don't know why the royalty all have to be aliens, but that's the way it works. And I always found that strange myself as a kid. Like, why is this place supposed to be ruled by people who aren't even from here and who periodically go away for huge periods of time? Like, there is a point at which they come back and it seems like all of them have been gone for like 100 years minimum. So it is a weird thing. And I like the acknowledging of that and the send up of it, and her, you know, wanting to be memorialized in the ways that they would have done in Narnia. This is the stuff that I'm excited about as I'm watching it. I'm feeling like positive, you know? She winds up like, she tells him Godspeed and she gives him a kiss on the cheek. And then all of a sudden they are in a ruined section of Fillory 2016. So they had been in the past, but they get brought to the proper place. And it is basically a complete, like, everything is dead. There's like puddles that are overgrown with slime and everything. And he gets hit in the head with a note from Elliot. It enchanted this to find you if you ever arrive. Hope you're not dead. Margot being such a bitch. Follow map to find us. Guys, I love this. I love it. This feels like oh, we just enchanted this to find you. Is it super convenient? Sure. I don't care. This is what I'm here for, you know? And I'm not saying that within their universe, within where Quentin and Elliot, like, I don't need them to be functioning like this is Narnia. But the references to it and the coming to terms with Narnia as an adult, I'm 100% here for that. So right now, I'm in a pretty good place with all of it. I'm very excited that we have like this sort of what feels like a mutual enjoyment and joy from Narnia, while also being like, yeah, but we're grown-ups and there's problems with this. You know, I think that's really smart and cool. And don't take this as me trying desperately to see the positive in this episode, because I'm not compensating. I am trying to explain the depth of my disappointment because of how happy I was to start off with at the way this was all going. And when it goes off track, how like betrayed I felt by it personally. I really did. So, you know, when they go meet up with everybody, at first everyone's sort of just like weirded out at the fact that Julia is going to be working with all of them, because obviously she tried to kill Quentin, and it seems like they're going to get past it. They're not all like happy to be friends again, but they're, you know, they're willing to take what they can get in terms of help, I think is really what it comes down to at this point. And they go to there's like this metalsmith, and this is what winds up becoming the crux of the matter for Elliot, is that this metalsmith had to create this knife. It was going to take a really long time, and in exchange for all of his labor, he wants one of them to marry his daughter and make her royalty. And apparently, Quentin and Julia did this way back when, So by the time they come back, the metal worker's dad, like the person who made it, is actually dead. His son is an adult, and he has a daughter, and that's the person that's going to be part of this deal. And she comes out, and she's actually, like, cute. And so it's not a terrible hardship for whoever. But it turns out that they don't get to pick who marries her. Nobody's, like... The High King is the one that has to marry her, and there is a blade that will decide who is High King. And Quentin unabashedly admits that he for sure thinks that this is going to be him. He's like, just never even occurs to him that he's not the one. So when the blade doesn't draw his blood, he's standing there baffled, because he's really at this point just like, well, who could it be? And it is mentioned that, like, it's High King. This blade is not tested out on any of the women at all. So I guess, okay. If Fillory is going to be like Narnia, Narnia was not exactly, Narnia functioned pretty much like the monarchy in England did. So, other than the fact that there could be multiple kings and queens at once. So that works with the story. It's just a bit of a bummer. Penny gets sliced. I thought it would be Penny. I really did, but it's not. And Elliot holds his hand out, and he does it in this way that's like, really, it seems like he does not expect it to be him at all. He's very casual about it, but it winds up slicing into his hand. It seems like a pretty deep wound too. Like, can we just maybe not go so hard with it on the first try, guy? But okay. And Elliot says it makes instinctual sense, I guess. And Penny turns and says, oh, this will make him easier to live with. And I cackled. This was the first time in the episode that I really laughed. And that was a good moment, Matthew says, this episode was very 2 steps forward, 500 steps back for me. I really loved a lot of elements, but it sadly got overshadowed by what happens. Jesse says, FYI, Fen is played by a different actress going forward. Fen is his daughter, I'm assuming. I didn't even hear her name, to be honest. But yeah, so this winds up being this whole conversation about whether he's going to do this and what he's going to do. And Margot is really saddened by the fact that she's going to have to say goodbye to him forever. And this bums me out deeply, that it seems she is never going to get to really help Elliot through whatever he has gone through. Their friendship took this huge hit after everything, and it doesn't seem like they're going to get to fix it. I hope that I'm wrong and that this doesn't wind up being the end of everything. I hope that they're not dead, first of all, obviously. But even more than that, I just really wanted them to work through this and find a way to be friends in an emotionally intimate way beyond just, I party with you all the time and don't judge you for your excesses, which felt like really where it came from. But in this scene, they don't really deal with that because they're so busy, focusing on what's going on with this marriage thing. And she has to just watch Elliot decide that maybe everything has led to this. It's an interesting proposition, essentially, that maybe he's fated to be here. He calls her Queen Margot the Destroyer and bows to her, which I'm here for, to be honest. I would love it if there could be multiple kings and queens here, like in Narnia, but it doesn't seem like that's what's happening. And she says, is it okay if I hate that you're getting married? And he nods and she says, I think you're the only person that I can stand. Guys, I don't know how many of you feel this way. I think more of us feel this way lately than used to, due to the fact that so many people we previously thought were cool are outing themselves as being absolute trash. But I was thinking about this yesterday, and the only people that I can talk to about certain things and really feel like I can truly say what I'm actually feeling and thinking are Rashawn and Owen. if anything were to happen to Rashawn, and it will eventually, because that's life, I don't know what I would do. I really don't. And the idea that she's just got Elliot and he's about to do this, like, I just feel for Margot a whole lot in this moment. I really do. Margot has just, like, got this place in my heart that I relate to so much as this continues to go on. And I feel like that's kind of remarkable, considering that she could easily just be read as, like, the mean girl. But she's so much more than that to me. And I really feel for her. I don't know if they wind up being alive. I'm kind of assuming that they continue on and do other things. But I want her and Elliot to, like, be okay and continue to, if not rule together, at least, like, be friends the way that it feels like the potential is there, you know? So we have the wedding, which is really weird. She's dressed in this, like, crazy outfit. And then later on, he says to everybody, well, I have a virgin to impregnate. And best of luck to you guys. I've got to go. And he calls her Mrs. Me, which I was like, oh, come on. She has a name. Stop it. And they all have to figure out what they're going to do on their own, which winds up leading to the rescue of the girl who got trapped by the beast. Guys, again, so incredibly rushed. I couldn't believe that scene took like 2 minutes. There is no conflict in them rescuing her at all. It was the weirdest thing. It was just so weird that they were able to just pull this off. And it was like, does anybody else, like, are they baffled by this the way that I am? Because I cannot figure out how this winds up being almost nothing within the episode when it's something that Penny has been, like, hearing and obsessing over for the whole season. Like, it's fine, I guess, but I just really thought this was going to mean more than it winds up meaning, because all it is that they need her to teach Penny how to travel with everybody. And then she and what's-his-face bounce, which, frankly, good. Like, we were getting a little too crowded with all these characters in the first place. We don't know or care about her particularly. The other dude was funny in a dorky way, but he didn't contribute anything. I'm fine with them being, like, taken off the table. I think it's fun that we have characters being smart and just being like, y'all aren't going to win this, so we're out. I'm not interested in dying. But it feels totally unnecessary to me to have this be a factor in the end. We could have had Penny figure out how to travel with everybody in a million different ways. He could still have had difficulty and wound up figuring it out on his own. And for this whole subplot to pretty much come to nothing is really, like, a sort of waste of time, in my opinion. Nicole says, I really think this is a problem with book and show changes. The book plots were dragged out, and then they tried to shove in new plot points. Okay. Jesse says, looking back, it seems like the first season rushes through a lot of the book events, and the next seasons veer far away from the source. And then Nicole again, also the show usually has their best episode as the penultimate of the season, then the season finale is just set up for the next season. Which is certainly true of, like, you know, shows like Game of Thrones and whatnot, that they do all of their, like, huge drastic confrontations in the penultimate episode. I really feel like if they had confrontation, like maybe the rescue of this girl, if this had been last episode, I could have seen that, you know, that would have worked better. But having it all crammed in here is really, like, a strange choice. And this is when they come across Plover. He has all of these, like, markings drawn all over him, which is supposed to be, like, he says it's meant to keep him alive so that Martin can start in on him again the next day. Age suspension magic, so every day he can start over. I really appreciate Quentin just saying, yeah, poor you. Because honestly, I don't feel fucking sorry for this guy. Like, there is a point where it's like, okay, nobody deserves a certain thing. And maybe there is a point where I'd feel like he doesn't. But he basically mentally manipulated, physically abused, raped, and continued to rape repeatedly a child in his care. So, no, I don't feel sorry for this motherfucker even a little bit, and I appreciate that nobody else in this scene is willing to give him an inch either. I love that Quentin stares at this guy with unblinking eyes and just cannot muster any sort of compassion or empathy. Like, I'm fine with it. And he tells them, when he was still a child, Fillory stopped taking him. Once he found his way back, he made it his mission to stay. He'd heard about the wellspring, the most ancient location in Fillory. And he winds up, like, putting together and we see him, like, get pieces of a map that is torn up from a bird's nest. It's a really weird thing. Again, it would be cool if we could get this, like, story, but we have to fucking plow forward at such a speed that we don't get to find out how he found this map or what mission he went on or how he put it together, where these pieces would be. Fillory runs on the wellspring, and so he's going to try and, like, basically connect himself to the wellspring by drinking from it, in order to keep himself here and be connected to Fillory in a way that he's not going to be left behind. And it's it's sort of it feels like a reference to me in a way to something in Narnia where Susan is a character. She's the older sister of Lucy, and she winds up being the one out of the four of them that doesn't get to come back to Narnia in the very end. And the last battle, I think, is garbage, but whatever. In that book, it's basically suggested that she became so, like, superficial and caught up in, like, social life and wearing lipstick and wearing stockings that she wanted to pretend that Narnia wasn't real, and eventually forced herself to grow out of being able to come back. And it's one of those really, like, low-key sexist moments of, oh, okay, so all the boys, they can be interested in hunting and dating and doing God knows what, and that doesn't disqualify them. But for some reason with Susan, it disqualifies her. And it is an interesting question. What if Susan was determined to come back? What if she was, like, unwilling to accept that she wasn't, welcome? And what would that look like? But they have it be that this kid is actively trying to escape an abusive home. And that, like, guys, that's such a gross premise, that he was trying desperately to escape an abusive home, and his desperation turned him into a literal monster. Why would you write this? Why would you do that? Like, why? Honestly, what are you trying to say? I mean, I'm not even trying to allege that you have to be making a grand statement in fiction when you write anything. You could just be like, well, this is what happened. But I don't feel like that applies here. This is too fantastical to just be like, well, some people are just, like, unwell. Some people just get unbalanced and don't find their way back. This is not The Sopranos, like, you could have done anything, and this is what you decided? I just don't really understand. So this leads to them, like, having to have the conversation about who's going to wield the knife, and Quentin talking to Alice and her drinking it. And we finally get to see the actual scene of what happens to Julia and her calling up Marina and being desperate for help. it's a weird, like, because she calls Marina and she says something happened, and we see all these bodies and all this blood. Like, she's not even able to, like, you know, when the god is coming at her and she tries to run, she literally, like, slips and falls in the blood, you know? And then we, like, see this moment of her later on reaching between her legs, and there's cum on her hands, so that it lets us know exactly what the fuck happened. And she kind of clenches her abdomen and gasps in this way, and that makes me wonder if there's not going to be fucking a, like, magic baby. And I'm just, guys, I said it once, I said it 1,000, I am not here for it. Because she says something's still happening, and her eyes glow. And I, you know, we can just take it as, oh, okay, that's how she got the ability to hold this knife, and that's it. I don't feel like that's it. I'm not excited about whatever is coming up. So, and this is when Martin, literally, when she holds the knife to his throat, after we just see this rape scene, he says to her, "Stronger, I see. So many surprises." Don't. Rape makes a woman stronger in the end is so awful. To have him literally fucking saying, even he doesn't know that's what it is in this scene, I get it, but we know, and that's how this fucking unavoidably comes across. Oh, I hate it so much. And we really don't need to be like, just, I hate it. I just hate it. I hate it. So she says, "You killed Umber and you trapped Ember. You know how to deal with gods. You know how to fuck up their shit." And Quentin behind her is freaking out, and she says, "I want to make a deal." And he says, "Let's." And then, boom, he's gone. Now, there's one last thing that I want to mention here, beside the fact that it looks like literally everybody's dead except Penny and Quentin. Can we just talk about the casting for Martin real quick? Because Martin is clearly supposed to be Jane's younger brother by a couple years. And I looked it up, and this actor is literally 11 years older than the woman who plays Jane in the present. Guys, shit like that makes me so angry. Like, I mean, I guess we could argue that maybe Jane on her time loops isn't actually, like, as old as she... Whatever. They just didn't want to cast somebody who looked the age she was supposed to look. And they're fine with casting an older man to play Martin. Like, it just makes me so irritated. It really, really does. He's literally more than a decade older than her when he is supposed to be a couple of years younger than her. I'm just irritated by it. It just makes me very annoyed. Matthew says time does move different in Fillory. You know where else it moves different, Matthew? Fucking Hollywood. Women are just, like, completely not an option for casting past a certain age, and that's just the facts. That's all it is. We can try and make it like it's time. It's not. They just didn't want to cast somebody of a certain age. That's all it was. Like, let's be honest. Let's all just be honest with each other and set aside what we, you know, that's it. It's just fucking annoying. Ugh, whatever. It, you know, like, and I wouldn't even have noticed this if they hadn't cast him as Martin. You know, they could have cast somebody else, but no. They just decided to go with this zaddy over here. Anyway, guys, I hated this. I really did. It started off, like, so promising, and I was so here for it, and, like, so here for it in that way that I am as a kid reading Narnia. Like, I really opened myself up to it because I was just feeling like this person got it, and then was so completely slapped in the face that I just cannot help but take it fucking personally at this point. So I'm going to trust y'all that it gets better. I really don't think I'd continue watching if I were watching this for myself. Like, I just don't think there were a lot of people that told me they stopped watching after it. Rashawn was one of them. She said she watched the first season and then she was like, nope. I get it. I do. Like, I would have lost faith by this point, especially if I wasn't aware of what was source material and what wasn't. Y'all are saying that it moves away from the source material almost completely from here on out. And if this is what the source material is, good. I'm really shocked that people like were wanting me to cover the books for the show. I'm like, do you guys get me at all? Because y'all would have been like very disappointed by my reaction to this. I can almost promise you. But hopefully the show is, you know, going to like, maybe these writers weren't thrilled about having to stick to the actual source material in this first season. And I don't know. I'd be interested in hearing about it, but I'm sure that there's no way to really do that without spoiling me. So, but I'm over time here, so I'm going to go. Thank you guys for hanging out with me and listening to me rant. I'm still very angry. Ugh, I really am. But I'm going to have a vacation. I'm going to do LeakyCon, and Rashawn's going to be visiting. And then in another week, it'll be actually a week from Friday. And I think there's an episode scheduled that day. Let me see. Let's see. We've got Gravity Falls. We've got Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. We got Lyriel. Okay, so no, not Friday. The next one is on the 20th. So about 2 weeks from today. So yeah, guys, I'm just so mad. And the one thing I can say is that I appreciate that there are other people who had a lot of the same problems with not only this episode, but other stuff that I took issue with. And they appreciate that I'm addressing that. And I get how that can be, that you just want to hear somebody else tell you that you're not crazy for hating a thing that other people all seem to really like. And I don't know that other people all seem to really like it, but there can be just, you know, circles of people who aren't willing to talk about or don't see the problems that you see. And then they sort of make you feel like you're overreacting or reading into things too much. And that's so frustrating. So I'm glad that I can at least be that for you guys. All right. Well, again, thank you, Ashley, for commissioning this. But also, Ashley, go to hell. And I will see you guys in 2 weeks with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.